Hi, Four Graces. Now, this video is going to talk about the reading paper final reminders. So, if I were you, I would have taken out the final examination reminders booklet with all your faces on, that booklet. Okay? And today we'll focus on reading paper, so page 2 to page 7. And by the end of the video, I will also talk about the answers. So if you haven't done your exercise, you may want to skip that part. I will give you a notice by then, okay? Now, first, in terms of reading paper and all the other papers, I would have given you a special training area, because for each of the classes you will have different difficulties, and for our class I don't see you having a problem in other question types. Not serious problems though, but then in terms of the question type of inferencing, that means you have to guess or you have to deduce information from the text, or the answers are not direct. That would be the answers that I think our class would have problems with, okay? And also one of the problem is the reading speed, okay? Now let's start with the reminders and see if those exercises would help you, okay? Now for time management, there are something I want you to remember. For example, if you still remember, we always have the 1 mark 1 minute estimation. So how do I estimate the time that I spend on each page? I would just quickly glance through 6 or 7 marks. It means that for this page, 6 or 7 minutes is the maximum time that you spend on each of the pages. So for part A, usually I will spend 40 minutes. And for part B, I will suggest you to have 45 minutes. And then at the end, you will have 5 minutes for proofreading. Now for this 5 minutes, I would like you to set your reading texts aside. That means you just look at the question and your answer. So for example, if the question asks you what was the time where Miss Yun started talking, then your answer should be the time was 7:30. Okay, so this type of very silly mistakes would cause you a mark, because the tenses that you use actually hinted on whether it is still true. If you use past tense, it means that it is no longer true. For example, Ms. Yun was a student and now I am a teacher. So this kind of tenses, although you might think, oh, it's just grammatical mistakes, but it changes the meaning of the answer, and those would cause you mark. So what I would suggest you to do is, for the last 5 minutes, remember to put away the reading text. That is no longer important. For that 5 minutes, just focus on the careless tenses mistake. See if your answer fit the question types, okay? Which we'll look at later. And please do not overspend your time on a certain question that is very difficult. Even if you have to infer meaning from the text, you spend around a minute or two, that will be enough, okay? Now, so when you are reading your text, there are something that I want you to remember. First, of course, pay attention to the title and subtitle of the text, because you will get the theme. And when you are doing the whole exercise, remember to keep that theme in your mind. Even though there might be paragraphs where you find the words are super difficult and it doesn't seem to be relevant, you have to keep that theme in mind and guess what could be the meaning of the difficult passage or the difficult paragraphs, okay? And if you are looking for the problem itself, what the writing is about, what is the summary of the whole passage, then we usually look at the first 2 paragraphs. It is just like what we teach you in writing. If I want to know the question, I need to go to your first paragraph and draw all the bits of information. For example, from your first paragraph, I should be able to tell which text type you're writing, which side you're on. If we ask you to choose a side, what is the topic or what is the theme of the whole passage. So we ought to see everything in the first 2 paragraphs, okay? And then for easier to handle questions, especially identifying attitudes and opinions, we don't want to go over the passage twice. And when we have to bring up a new person in our passages, we know that we are going to show something about that person. Usually we would want them to comment on a certain thing or their opinions matter. That's why we have to bring their names up, right? And when we introduce a person, I would not stop by, okay, this is Thomas, full stop, and no further information. I would have introduced Thomas, or Thomas, an expert of what has shown us that, and tell us what Thomas has mentioned. So the first time a person's name come up is usually where we or the writer tell you about that person's thoughts, views, or stance. That's why when you highlight people's name instead of the pronouns that are used to describe them, we usually get more of the attitude or opinion or the views, because the first time we introduce that person or that character is where we want to show that person's opinion. Okay? Next, if you want to remember, it's not a leisure kind of reading. We always go to the question first, find out what we're looking at or what we're looking for in the text, then we go through the passage. Do not do it vice versa, because after you read the whole thing, you will still have to read the whole passage once again after you read the questions. Okay? Then, we usually highlight a paragraph keywords. Now for weaker classes, I'll ask them to highlight topic sentences. But for you, I think you could be able to spot the paragraph keyword in the topic sentences of each of the paragraphs so that you can answer summary questions better. And if you have to go back to each of the paragraphs for them, it would waste a lot of your time. Because for summary questions, it usually appears by the end of the passage. Okay? And then for the last bit, remember, please do not skip any questions. Once you skip them, even for someone who have done the paper twice, once you skip a certain skip a certain question and then you move on to work on other questions, once you go back, you'll find that you have lost track of where the passage is at, what are the gist of the points that the passage is working on, and also you forgot which part the answer would come from, especially after you have finished like question 14 and then you moved on to question 15. Then after you have read everything, you kind of forgot what question 14 and 16 is about, and if you have to work on question 15 again, it will cost you extra time. And in a text where you can only use 1 minute per question or per mark, you don't have a lot of time to waste. Okay, and remember, you still need time to write the long questions as well. Okay, now as I said, we'll go and move on to all the question types. It will be really quick, so get your notes ready. If it is summary question, if you remember, we will look into the first and the last paragraph. Now, the first two paragraphs are important. It depends on how long the paragraphs are. But the last paragraph would also be a summary. So it depends on where you are at your reading, because you read your question first and then your passage, right? If you haven't read your last paragraph, I would suggest you to read the last paragraph first if you need to. Okay? Now, and next, it's very important to highlight the question words. This is easier for you to deal with your proofreading time, and also you should be able to tell what the answers of that question looks like. For example, if we ask you what, then usually the answer will be a noun or noun phrase. Who, of course, names, and make sure the names are in capital letter. This will cost you a mark in both your reading and listening paper. Okay? Then if it's when, of course, the answer will be numbers. If it's where, again, it will be names of a place or a certain building, or it could be an area, but all of these, please remember to capitalize them if needed. And if you see the question asking you for the aim or purpose, for what, then your answer will be is to do something, to plus the verb. Okay? Now, if we ask you questions like, find words with the same meaning or opposite meaning, the first thing, of course, is to go through the past of speech. Usually, we won't change the past of speech, especially if it is ing form. The answer would be in ing form as well. So what you need to do is, after you think of all these, replace the words from the original text with your answer and see whether it makes sense in a sentence. If it doesn't, then even if it is in the right form, you might have to reconsider. Okay? Next, if it is to identify views and attitudes, we have talked about this. Highlight people's name, it would be easier for you. And if you want a more specific way of finding the views and stands, always look for adjectives around that person's speech. If the adjectives are in negative or positive ways, it would help you if you don't understand what that person is saying. Sometimes we would face very technical terms an expert is using. Then we might not understand whether that person is positive or negative towards an idea. So you might need other adjectives as well. Okay? Now for summary close, first look into, again, parts of speech. Do we need a verb? Do we need a noun? Do we need an adjective there? And then make a certain prediction of the meaning. Then go for the passage. Do not start directly going to the passage because this would cost you extra time to read it again once you have that kind of information. Okay? And then for MC, I would not dig into this because all the subjects that you have done, for example, your electives, have told you the importance of eliminating impossible ideas. Okay? Now for referencing questions, who does they refer to? Remember, when you are checking during the proofreading time, make sure you check if it is they or we, are your answers with an S, question mark, question mark. If it is all of these adjectives, possessive adjectives, you need apostrophe S or S apostrophe. Do you have that? And then if they are possessive pronouns like mine, yours, then the answer should be apostrophe S or S apostrophe plus noun phrase. Okay, so it is mine, and we ask you what does mine refer to. It is Eva's. That would be wrong. The answer should be Eva's book. Okay, so make sure you know this. Okay, now for the next part, it will be checking of the answers of the paragraphs. So if you haven't done the exercise here, I'll give you 5 seconds to pause your video now, or to complete it, then come back. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's start. Now for the first question, the answer is B. Okay, the passage is to provide a snapshot of the discovery of America and the early years. It's not about why America was named, how America was named. It's not about how Europeans eliminated Native Americans. And it's not only to talk about American Indians as well. It's talk about what happened during the discovery. Okay? Now, and then we have question number 2. The answer is C, more respectful of nature. I think this could be easily guessed actually. And then we have the answer of boy. And the answer is also boy. Okay, a lot of students would have chosen 1, 2, but it's not alien diseases. Okay, but anyways, it is close enough though. Okay. Now for level 2, the answer is C. Okay. Now for option 4, that means D, it is a mistake when we use the word retrospectively because it's not about past events. And for A, it's only quoting the actions, but it's not the right option. For B, it talks about motivation, but motivation was not mentioned in this paragraph. So if you want to talk about the inference, it wouldn't be about this paragraph. Okay? So hopefully you get this correct. Level 3 is the hardest, but then the answer would be A. Now in terms of reading paper, go through the 2012 reading paper and you could redo this year's second this year's first UT and first exam paper to see if you get the skills. Remember, even if the passage is not about food or not about traveling, still it would be a good way for you to practice the skills. Okay, 2012 and 2014 papers. Okay, if you have any questions, do come to me or ask me on the Google Classroom. Okay, at Oil for Graces.